Is China's worldview benevolent or malevolent? The UK's China strategy is naive. I think naive is maybe a little bit harsh, but there's definitely room for improvement. We've got a good core of our strategy: compete, cooperate, challenge, but I think it's time that we work a little bit more on really fleshing out what falls into each of those buckets. What's the biggest thing the UK gets wrong about China? I think too often we treat China as a monolith, but it's a country of 1.4 billion people working across almost every sector imaginable. There's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. China is the UK's biggest threat. We should cut ties. Definitely not. There's no way you're going to be able to address almost all of the biggest global issues without some level of Chinese participation. And even on the issues that we do disagree with, having dialogue, having communication is the most effective way to actually push for change. UK-China relations can only be improved by education and cultural awareness. I mean, this is definitely a huge part of this. If you have your China strategy written by a group of people who've never set foot in China, that's going to be a problem. China thinks in decades, but we have 4-year election cycles. I mean, this is always the problem we have, isn't it? It's so hard to do the long-term thinking you need for long-term challenges. But it's definitely worth doing, because we really do need to address that asymmetry in information there currently is between the UK and China. And what I mean by that is not just the difference in the amount of people who speak Chinese in the UK versus who speak English in China, it's also the amount of understanding and appreciation of each other's culture, each other's systems, each other's history. Is China's worldview benevolent or malevolent? Again, this is one of the things, there is no one-size-fits-all approach to China. There are going to be things that China's doing globally that we want to push back against, but there are also areas where China is going to be acting as a force for good. And our challenge is going to be distinguishing between those two. No country is managing China well. I think it's definitely fair to say there's some variety in how well countries are handling China. And I do think from a UK perspective, we've been falling behind some of our partners. We've had so few ministerial visits, we've been engaging less, we've had less dialogue, but we've also been taking less measures at home, and we risk getting left behind by some of our key partners. Chinese direct investment abroad brings more risks than rewards. This has been a really big question in the UK, and absolutely the UK needs to think seriously about its national security, just in the same way that China thinks seriously about its national security. But I also think you can't ignore that in those safer areas for investment, there is room for deeper cooperation that could be really helpful for boosting British growth. The UK should learn from China's approach to technology. I think it's fair to say the UK and China are never going to see entirely eye to eye on technology. But when it comes to that question of how do you set yourself up for the industries of the future, especially AI, the UK needs to be paying attention to what China's doing on those fronts. Will the next big AI innovator be Chinese? I mean, I would say a lot of the big AI innovators already are. And even though the US might still have the leading edge advantage, China is actually racing ahead in terms of diffusion and in terms of scale. China is less stable than it seems. This is a question I get asked all the time. And I think it speaks to the fact that China is a really hard system to understand. For a lot of outsiders, it does feel like a black box. And I think that's somewhere that not just the UK, but a lot of countries could do with really upping their capabilities to try and get a bit more of a peek behind that curtain. China is making it up as it goes along. I don't know if that's the fairest assessment, but I also think it's true. There's often a tendency to think that everything in China is a strategically orchestrated master plan. But China is a system made up of individuals just like us, and the more we can understand that, the better we can shape our strategies.